പ്രിയപ്പെട്ടവരെ, KPCC വിചാർ ഭാഗിൻ്റെ സമകാലീന വിഷയങ്ങളിൽ നിരന്തരമായി പ്രതികരിച്ചുകൊണ്ടുള്ള പ്രതിമാസ പരിപാടിയിലെ ഈ മാസത്തെ പ്രഭാഷണ സായാഹ്നത്തിലേക്ക് നമ്മൾ കടക്കുകയാണ്. ഈ ചടങ്ങിൻ്റെ അധ്യക്ഷനായിട്ട് മുൻ ഡെപ്യൂട്ടി സ്പീക്കർ ശ്രീ പാലോട് രവിയെ ഞാൻ സാദരം ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു. പ്രിയപ്പെട്ടവരെ, സദസ്സ് ഏകദേശം നമ്മൾ സ്ഥിരം പരിപാടിക്ക് വരുന്ന ആളുകളായതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ വിചാർ വിഭാഗിനെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് ഞാനൊരു ആമുഖം പറയുന്നില്ല. KPCC വിചാർ വിഭാഗ് നമ്മുടെ തലസ്ഥാന ജില്ലയിൽ സാഹിത്യ സാംസ്കാരിക രംഗത്ത് നിരന്തരമായി കാലത്തോട് അർത്ഥപൂർണമായി സംവദിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. നമ്മളെല്ലാവരും ചേർന്നിട്ടാണ്. രോഹിംഗ്യൻ അഭയാർത്ഥികളുടെ വിഷയം എടുത്തു കഴിഞ്ഞാലും ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ വോട്ട് ചോരി വിഷയം എടുത്തു കഴിഞ്ഞാലും ഏറ്റവും പ്രഗത്ഭരായ ആളുകളെ തിരുവനന്തപുരത്ത്, അറിവിൻ്റെ നഗരമായ തിരുവനന്തപുരത്ത് പങ്കെടുപ്പിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മുടെ അഭിപ്രായം വ്യക്തമായി പറയുന്നതിന് നമ്മളെക്കാലവും ശ്രദ്ധിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. വിവിധങ്ങളായ വിഷയങ്ങളിൽ ഉജ്ജ്വലരായ ഡോക്ടർ ശശി തരൂർ, ശ്രീ VD സതീശൻ, ശ്രീ രമേശ് ചെന്നിത്തല അടക്കമുള്ള വിശ്രുതരായ, ഏറ്റവും അവസാനം കൽപ്പറ്റ നാരായണൻ മാഷ്, അതുപോലെ തന്നെ അബ്ദുൾ സമദ് സമദാനി, നമ്മുടെ ഡോക്ടർ PK രാജശേഖരൻ അടക്കമുള്ള വിശ്രുതരായ പ്രഭാഷകർ നിരവധി പ്രഭാഷണങ്ങളിലൂടെ നമ്മുടെ ചിന്തകളെ ഉദ്ദീപിപ്പിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. നമ്മുടെ ദീർഘകാലത്തെ ആഗ്രഹമാണ് ശ്രീ പ്രശാന്ത് ഭൂഷൺ നമ്മുടെ വേദിയിൽ എത്തി നമ്മളിലേക്ക് അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ആശയങ്ങൾ പങ്കുവയ്ക്കുക എന്നുള്ളത്. അത് നമ്മൾ നിരന്തരമായി ആഗ്രഹിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരുന്ന ആഗ്രഹമാണ് ഇന്ന് ഈ വൈകുന്നേരം ഇവിടെ സാക്ഷാത്കരിക്കുന്നത്. ഒരു പ്രത്യേക കാലാവസ്ഥയിലാണ്. ഇന്ത്യയുടെ തെരഞ്ഞെടുപ്പ് വ്യവസ്ഥ, തെരഞ്ഞെടുപ്പ് കമ്മീഷനെ അവിടെ അങ്ങനെ നിലനിർത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആദ്യത്തെ സർക്കാർ രൂപം കൊടുത്ത തെരഞ്ഞെടുപ്പ് കമ്മീഷൻ, പാർഷ്വാലിറ്റി ഇല്ലാത്ത തെരഞ്ഞെടുപ്പ് കമ്മീഷൻ, ആ തെരഞ്ഞെടുപ്പ് കമ്മീഷൻ അവിടെ നിലനിർത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. പക്ഷേ ആ തെരഞ്ഞെടുപ്പ് കമ്മീഷനെ, ആ സിസ്റ്റം നിലനിർത്തിക്കൊണ്ട്, സിസ്റ്റത്തിനെ ദുരുപയോഗം ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ട് തിരഞ്ഞെടുപ്പ് വിജയം യാഥാർത്ഥ്യമാക്കുന്നു എന്നുള്ളത് കുറേ കാലം കൊണ്ട് ഇന്ത്യക്കാരൻ്റെ മനസ്സിലെ സംശയമാണ്. അവർ ഈ വോട്ടിംഗ് മെഷീൻ അടക്കം മാനിപ്പുലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നുള്ള സംശയം നിരന്തരമായി കോമൺ മാൻ ഓഫ് ഇന്ത്യ, സാധാരണ മനുഷ്യർ ഉയർത്തുന്ന ഒരു സംശയമായിരുന്നു. ആ സംശയത്തിന് അടിവരയിട്ടുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഇന്ത്യയുടെ പ്രതിപക്ഷ നേതാവ് ശ്രീ രാഹുൽ ഗാന്ധി വ്യക്തമായ തെളിവുകളോടുകൂടി ഇലക്ഷൻ കമ്മീഷൻ ആ സിസ്റ്റത്തിനെ നിലവിലത്തെ അധികാരികൾ ദുരുപയോഗം ചെയ്യുകയാണ്. അവരുടെ വിജയത്തിന് വേണ്ടി അവർ ഇലക്ഷൻ റിസൾട്ട് മാനിപ്പുലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുകയാണ്. അത് ഈ സിസ്റ്റത്തിൻ്റെ ലൂപ്പ് ഹോളിലൂടെ അവർ അധികാരത്തിൽ എത്തുന്നതിനുള്ള അവരുടെ വിജയം ഉറപ്പിക്കുകയാണ് എന്നുള്ളത് കേവലം രാഷ്ട്രീയ നേതാക്കൾ നടത്തുന്ന പ്രസംഗത്തിലൂടെയല്ല, മറിച്ച് കൃത്യമായ തെളിവുകളിലൂടെ ഇന്ത്യയിൽ അത് അടയാളപ്പെടുത്തുകയും ആ അടയാളപ്പെടുത്തലിൽ ഒതുങ്ങി നിൽക്കാതെ രാഹുൽ ഗാന്ധിയുടെ നേതൃത്വത്തിൽ ബീഹാറിൽ അവർ ഈ പറയുന്ന വിഷയം ജനഹൃദയങ്ങളിലെത്തിക്കാൻ ഒരു വലിയ റാലി ബീഹാറിലൂടെ നടത്തുകയും ചെയ്യുന്ന അതേ അവസരത്തിലാണ് നമ്മൾ തിരുവനന്തപുരത്ത് കേരളവും ജാഗ്രതപ്പെടേണ്ടിയിരിക്കുന്നു. കേരളത്തിലും ഇതുപോലെ മാനിപ്പുലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യപ്പെടുന്നു, തൃശ്ശൂർ അടക്കം എന്നുള്ളതിൻ്റെ നിരവധി തെളിവുകൾ പുറത്തു വന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന വേളയിലാണ് നമ്മൾ ഇത്തരത്തിൽ വളരെ സജീവമായി ഈ വിഷയത്തിൽ വളരെ സ്വതന്ത്രമായി തരത്തിലുള്ള ഭയവുമില്ലാതെ അഭിപ്രായം പുറപ്പെടുവിക്കുന്ന പ്രശാന്ത് ഭൂഷൺ സാറിനെ പങ്കെടുപ്പിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഇത്തരത്തിൽ ഒരു ലെക്ചർ നടത്തുക എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ ചിന്തകളെ അത് ഉദ്ദീപിപ്പിക്കുന്നു എന്ന് മാത്രമല്ല, നമ്മൾ ഈ കാലത്തോട് നമ്മൾ വിളിച്ചു പറയുകയാണ്, രാഹുൽ ഗാന്ധി പറഞ്ഞ വിഷയം സജീവമായി നിലനിൽക്കുകയാണ്, അത് ജനാധിപത്യത്തെ തകർക്കുന്നതാണ്. ഈ സിസ്റ്റം തകരുക എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ജനാധിപത്യവും ഭരണഘടനയും തകരുന്നതാണ്. ഓരോ ഇന്ത്യക്കാരനും ജാഗ്രതപ്പെടണം എന്നുള്ള നമ്മുടെ ബോധത്തെ, നമ്മുടെ സമൂഹത്തിൻ്റെ ബോധത്തെ കുറച്ചുകൂടെ ഉദ്ദീപിപ്പിക്കുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ ഇന്നിവിടെ ഈ പരിപാടി സംഘടിപ്പിക്കുന്നത്. ഞാൻ അധികമായി പറയുന്നില്ല. ഈ പരിപാടിയുടെ അധ്യക്ഷ പദവി അലങ്കരിക്കുന്നത്, ഞാൻ എപ്പോഴും പറയാറുള്ളത് പോലെ, രാഷ്ട്രീയ പ്രവർത്തനം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് തെരുവുകളിലെ സമരവും പ്രക്ഷോഭവും മാത്രമല്ല. അത് നെഹ്റുവിയൻ പോളിസി അനുസരിച്ച്, അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ചിന്താപദ്ധതി അനുസരിച്ച് കൾച്ചറൽ പൊളിറ്റിക്സ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നതിന് രാഷ്ട്രീയ രംഗത്ത് വളരെയധികം പ്രാധാന്യമുണ്ട് എന്ന് ഞങ്ങളെ പറഞ്ഞു പഠിപ്പിക്കുകയും ഞങ്ങളെ കൊണ്ട് ഇത്തരം കാര്യങ്ങൾ മുന്നിൽ നിന്ന് ചെയ്യിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്ന മുൻ ഡെപ്യൂട്ടി സ്പീക്കർ കൂടെയായിട്ടുള്ള ശ്രീ പാലോട് രവിയെ ഞാൻ ഏറെ സ്നേഹത്തോടെ ഈ സദസ്സിലേക്ക് സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുന്നു.
വളരെ സന്തോഷത്തോടെയാണ് വളരെ ആനുകാലിക പ്രസക്തിയുള്ള രാജ്യം മുഴുവൻ ജനാധിപത്യ സംവിധാനം നിലനിൽക്കണമെന്ന് ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്ന ലോകമെമ്പാടും ചർച്ച ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു സബ്ജക്റ്റാണ് ഇന്ന് ബഹുമാനനായ ശ്രീ പ്രശാന്ത് ഭൂഷൺ ഇവിടെ അവതരിപ്പിക്കുന്നു. അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ സാന്നിധ്യത്തിൽ വളരെയേറെ സന്തോഷമുണ്ട്. കാരണം ഇന്ത്യയിൽ നമുക്കറിയാം, ഈ മൂല്യാധിഷ്ഠിതമായ ഒരു സാമൂഹ്യ ക്രമത്തിന് വേണ്ടി, കറപ്ഷനെതിരായി, അതുപോലെ തന്നെ പരിസ്ഥിതി സംരക്ഷണത്തിന് വേണ്ടി, എൻവയൺമെന്റൽ തുടങ്ങിയ മേഖലകളിൽ അതിശക്തമായ പോരാട്ടം ഒരുപക്ഷെ ഈ രാജ്യത്തിൻ്റെ അടിത്തറ മനസ്സിലാക്കിക്കൊണ്ട്, ഫൗണ്ടേഷൻ, മഹാത്മാഗാന്ധി ആഗ്രഹിച്ചതുപോലെ എന്തിനാണോ ഈ രാജ്യം, ഇന്ത്യ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന രാജ്യത്തിന് രൂപം നൽകിയത്, ആ രാജ്യം നിലനിർത്തുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടിയുള്ള ശക്തമായ ഒരു പോരാട്ടമാണ് ശ്രീ പ്രശാന്ത് ഭൂഷണന്റെ നേതൃത്വത്തിൽ ഇന്ന് രാജ്യത്ത് നടന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. ഈ 21 വയസ്സിന് താഴെയുള്ളവർക്ക് വോട്ട് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള അവരുടെ അവകാശം ഫണ്ടമെന്റൽ റൈറ്റിലുള്ളതാണ്. അത് ഭരണഘടനാ നിർമ്മാണ സഭയുടെ ആ ഗ്രന്ഥം വായിക്കുമ്പോൾ, ആ റിപ്പോർട്ട് വായിക്കുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് നന്നായിട്ടത് മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ കഴിയും. അതുമായി ബന്ധപ്പെട്ടാണ് ഇലക്ഷൻ കമ്മീഷൻ. ഒരു രാജ്യത്തിൻ്റെ, നമുക്കറിയാം, രാജ്യം, ഭരണം, ഇപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ പറയുമല്ലോ, എക്സിക്യൂട്ടീവ്, ജുഡീഷ്യറി, ലെജിസ്ലേച്ചർ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന 3 pillars. അതിൽ ഏറ്റവും പരമപ്രധാനമായ ഈ നമ്മുടെ രാജ്യത്തിൻ്റെ ഡെമോക്രസി നിലനിർത്തുന്നതിൻ്റെ ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു കണ്ണി ഏതെന്ന് ചോദിച്ചാൽ ഇലക്ഷൻ കമ്മീഷനാണ്. ഞാൻ ശ്രീ ചിത്ര തിരുനാൾ സമിതിയുടെ പ്രസിഡൻ്റായിരുന്ന കാലത്ത് ഞാനൊരു ചിത്ര തിരുനാൾ മെമ്മോറിയൽ സ്പീച്ച് നടത്തുന്നതിന് അന്നത്തെ ചീഫ് ഇലക്ഷൻ കമ്മീഷണർ ശ്രീ ശേഷനെ ഒരു ചടങ്ങിന് വിളിക്കുകയുണ്ടായി. അദ്ദേഹം തിരുവനന്തപുരത്ത് വന്നു. ഏതാണ്ട് ഒരു 2 ദിവസം എനിക്ക് അദ്ദേഹത്തോടൊപ്പം യാത്ര ചെയ്യാനും അവസരമുണ്ടായി. നമുക്കറിയാം, ശ്രീ ശേഷൻ ചീഫ് ഇലക്ഷൻ കമ്മീഷണർ ആയിരുന്നപ്പോൾ ഈ മേഖലയിൽ ഉണ്ടാക്കിയെടുക്കേണ്ട മാറ്റങ്ങളെക്കുറിച്ച്, ഈ നമ്മളെല്ലാവരും ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്ന സ്വതന്ത്രമായ വോട്ടിങ്ങിനെ കുറിച്ച്, ആ സിസ്റ്റം നിലനിർത്തേണ്ടതിനെക്കുറിച്ച്, അതിലൂടെ ഡെമോക്രസി ഓരോ വർഷം കടന്നു പോകുമ്പോഴും ആ ജനാധിപത്യ അവകാശം സംരക്ഷിക്കപ്പെടേണ്ടതിനെക്കുറിച്ച്, അതിലൂടെ ഡെമോക്രസി നിലനിർത്തേണ്ടതിനെക്കുറിച്ചുള്ള അതിശക്തമായ ഒരു വാദമുഖമായിരുന്നു അദ്ദേഹം നമ്മുടെ 2-3 കോൺഫറൻസുകളിൽ തിരുവനന്തപുരത്ത് ഉദാഹരണ സഹിതം അദ്ദേഹം നടത്തി. ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ ഈ രാജ്യത്തെ സ്നേഹിക്കുന്നവർ, ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു, ഇന്ത്യ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന രാജ്യം, ആ ഇന്ത്യ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ദേശം രൂപപ്പെടുത്തിയതിൻ്റെ ഏറ്റവും വലിയ ബേസിക് ഫൗണ്ടേഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഡെമോക്രസിയാണ്. ആ ബേസിക് ഫൗണ്ടേഷൻ ഉലഞ്ഞാൽ ഈ രാജ്യം ഇല്ലാതാകും, ഈ രാജ്യം ഛിന്നഭിന്നമാകും. അതാണ് ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനമാണ് ഇലക്ഷൻ കമ്മീഷനും നമുക്കിപ്പം നമ്മുടെ ഭരണഘടനാ റൈറ്റ്സ്. അതിനെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് ഇന്ന് രാജ്യം മുഴുവനും ചർച്ച ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു സബ്ജക്റ്റ് ആയതുകൊണ്ട് ആ സബ്ജക്റ്റിനെ കുറിച്ച് ബഹുമാനനായ ശ്രീ പ്രശാന്ത് ഭൂഷണോട് സംസാരിക്കും. അദ്ദേഹം ഈ വേദി പങ്കിടാൻ തയ്യാറായതിലുള്ള അത്യധികമായ സന്തോഷം രേഖപ്പെടുത്തിക്കൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ വാക്കുകൾ അവസാനിപ്പിക്കുന്നു. നിങ്ങളോട് സംസാരിക്കുന്നതിന് ബഹുമാനനായ ശ്രീ പ്രശാന്ത് ഭൂഷണെ ഞാൻ വിനയപൂർവ്വം ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു.
Good evening, friends. I am glad that the organizers have organized a meeting to discuss a very important issue in the country today, that is the integrity of our whole electoral system. As you all know, India adopted a democracy. Our constitution gave us a democracy, but it was a representative democracy, not a direct democracy, which means that people do not directly decide what decisions are to be taken, what policies are to be made, what laws are to be made. People just are given the power to elect their representatives, and then these representatives form the government, they sit in the legislature, they make the policies, they make the laws, they take various decisions. We have a good electoral system, a honest and fair electoral system by which the people's will could be reflected in parliament, in the state assemblies, etc. But unfortunately, what we are seeing today is not quite what was expected. There are many reasons for this. The first reason is that our whole electoral system has been overtaken by money power. And it is money which very largely determines the outcome of elections today. To a very large extent, elections are being influenced by those with money, by those with the power of propaganda. And one of the reasons for that is that we chose first past the post at two levels. When we vote to elect our representatives, the person who gets the maximum votes becomes the sole representative of that constituency, even if he received only 30% of the vote and the other candidates together received 70% votes. But if nobody else received more votes than him, then he becomes the sole representative. Then when the government is formed, the coalition or the party which gets a majority in the parliament or in the state assembly, that forms the government, and the opposition, even if they have 49% of the MLAs or MPs, they do not count for anything in the running of the government. The result of this system of first past the post at two levels is that when people vote to elect, they know that only one person will be elected and only one party will come to power. Therefore, they do not vote for the person or the party who they feel has virtually no chance of winning or coming to power. They will then see which parties and which candidates have some chance of being elected and coming to power, and then vote for the less bad among those that they see have some chance. Now the perception of which party or which candidate has some chance of winning or no chance of winning, that perception is created by the visibility of the candidate and the political party. And that visibility is largely purchased by money. With money you can advertise in the media, you can put up large hoardings all over, you can print a lot of posters and get your paid workers to distribute your posters. You can even organize large rallies, political rallies by money, by paying people to come and sit for your rally. And then the media shows that, oh, Modi addressed a very large rally here, without disclosing that all the people who came there were paid to come. So, the visibility becomes a game of money, and people's perception of who is winnable or not winnable is formed by visibility. And therefore, elections become to a very large extent a game of money. What Anna Hazare once famously said, that elections have become a game of money to power, and then power is misused once you are in power to get more money. If you see electoral bonds, when the details of the electoral bonds came out as to who has purchased and to which party they were given, we found that more than 50% of the electoral bonds went to the BJP alone, and the other parties put together received less than 50%. And in almost all cases, the electoral bonds were given by companies to parties by way of bribes. Bribes for getting contracts, bribes for getting the ED and the CBI off their back, bribes for getting the drug controller off the backs of pharmaceutical companies who were selling substandard medicines, etc. So, you can easily misuse power, and it is being misused. Unfortunately, there is no anti-corruption movement which was there in 2011, 12, etc. If there had been a strong anti-corruption movement today, we would have found that corruption today, especially corruption of the central government, is far more than what was in 2011, 12, etc. Now, in order to reduce the role of money in elections, the Representation of People Act created a limit to the expenditure that individual candidates can incur in elections. It's about 1 crore for Lok Sabha and about 25 lakhs for Vidhan Sabha. Now, however, this limit is not being enforced, and we know of many cases where candidates for Lok Sabha are spending sometimes even 50 crores or 100 crores, more than 50 or 100 times the limit, and yet Election Commission doesn't catch them. Of course, Election Commission doesn't want to catch, because Election Commission has come under the control of the government, which was not the case many years ago. Since the time of session till Modi came to power at the center, Election Commission was largely regarded as independent. But after Modi came to power, we have seen a phenomenon whereby the Election Commission is not being seen as independent. They are functioning as an instrumentality of the BJP, and increasingly so as an instrumentality of the BJP. So Election Commission doesn't want to catch, though they are supposed to catch those people who are spending more than the limit. They are also supposed to enforce the model code of conduct, but we are seeing that the model code of conduct is not being enforced against the ruling party. Candidates from the ruling party who are spending more than the limit are not being caught. But even other candidates from the opposition who are spending more than the limit are also not being caught by the Election Commission. And the reason for that is, firstly, lack of will on the part of the Election Commission, but more than that, candidates are spending most of the money in cash, and it is very difficult for anybody to establish or to prove that this candidate spent this money if he is spending in cash. When this demonetization was brought, one of the reasons given by the Prime Minister was that he wanted a cashless economy. He said that he wanted an economy where all transactions are done through banks. Now, I can understand that ordinary people cannot be asked to do all their transactions through banks, but they could have easily made a one-section amendment to the Representation of People Act which said political parties and candidates will have to spend everything through banks. No cash receipts, no cash expenditure. Now, if that law had been brought, and if it had been said, if people are caught spending money by cash or taking money in cash, then that would be deemed to be a corrupt practice, then a lot of this over expenditure by candidates could have been stopped. But that was not the intention. Therefore, this law was never brought. Then there is no limit. There is a limit on candidates. There is no limit on the expenditure of political parties. In electoral bonds alone, the BJP collected 8,000 crores in the last 5 years. From other corporate donations, they collected another 8,000 crores in the last 5 years. And in cash, you see, Adani is like their banker. Whenever BJP needs money, they just tell Adani that, look, we need 5,000 crores for the Bihar election, give us this 5,000 crores, and he produces 5,000 crores because he has enormous amounts of money stashed in these tax havens, which he has been allowed to loot through over-invoicing, under-invoicing by this government. Lakhs of crores. Therefore, at any time through Hawala transactions, he can bring 5,000 crores, 10,000 crores and give it. In the last election alone, it is said that the BJP spent 50,000 crores. 50,000 crores, if suppose they had set up 500 candidates and each candidate spent 1 crore, they could have spent 500 crores. 50,000 crores is 100 times that amount. 100 times. So therefore, this business of putting a limit on spending of candidates without putting a limit on spending of by political parties makes a mockery of this limit. So there should have been a limit on the spending of political parties also. That was also not brought. As a result of which, elections have become a free game of money to a very large extent, and the BJP alone has more than, much more than half. They have control over 75% of all election money in the country. So therefore, it's become difficult. It's not impossible, but it has become difficult to dislodge that party. But apart from that, it was thought that the Election Commission would conduct free and fair elections otherwise. But we are seeing problems at many levels. There is a very, very serious problem with the manner of functioning of the Election Commission. First of all, the Election Commission is functioning with almost zero transparency. I'll come to the issue of electronic voting machines and VVPAT machines. Or let me first deal with electronic voting machines and VVPAT machines, and then I'll come to the larger problem of the Election Commission. So, the Supreme Court many years ago in a good judgment said that look, you cannot just have votes cast and counted in these electronic voting machines which may be capable of being manipulated. Therefore, they said that you must have these paper audit trail with every electronic voting machine. And finally, VVPAT machines were fixed with every voting machine. But the Election Commission says that it will not count the paper slips in the VVPAT machines. They say that we will count the paper slips in only 2% as a sample. And there also, if we find a discrepancy between the EVM count and the VVPAT count, we will just take the VVPAT count, neglect the EVM count, which means that they will not look at the VVPATs of the other polling stations. If there is a problem with one EVM, there could be a problem with others. But that's not what they do. They say that we do a sample check of 2%, but if in that sample check a problem is found, they still don't check the whole. They still say, all right, only in that 2% we will check, and there the VVPAT count will override the EVM count. Now it is admitted by the Election Commission. See, earlier when the EVMs first came, EVMs were like calculators, they did not have any software in them. Now the EVMs which are being used, they have a software in them. And that software has to be loaded at the time when has to be loaded constituency by constituency, because the position of the candidates and the political parties can vary from constituency to constituency. In one constituency, the BJP may be number 2, in another it may be at number 3, in another it may be at number 4. So The EVM machine, when you press number 2, the machine must know that 2 here belongs to the BJP or 2 here belongs to the CPM. And that therefore a software has to be loaded constituency by constituency in each of the voting machines. Now that software can be a malicious software also. That software can be designed in a way which says that every second vote will go to the BJP. You can design the software in that way that irrespective of which button is pressed, thus every second vote will go to the BJP. So therefore it became very important to check the VVPAT. Unfortunately, when this case went to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court did not accept our plea that at least count all the VVPAT paper slips. When ballot papers were there, large ballot papers, and ballot papers were being counted, it did not take more than 24 hours to count all the ballot papers in all the constituencies. Now with these small slips, the slips only have one symbol. You can easily separate the slips, open up all the VVPATs, take out the VVPAT slips from each machine, put them symbol by symbol, and then count them. There is no difficulty in counting them. It can maximum take another 4 hours to count them. When you have elections which are spread over 6 weeks, 7 weeks, what's the problem in spending another 4 hours in counting the VVPAT slips? But the resistance is coming only from the Election Commission and the BJP and the ruling party. Otherwise, everybody is demanding count the VVPAT slips. But they are not doing that. And the other thing that they did was that they put a opaque glass over the VVPAT machines so that you cannot see what is happening inside the VVPAT machine except for 5 seconds when a light comes on from inside the machine which allows you to see the symbol on your slip for 5 seconds. After 5 seconds that light goes off. What happens when the light goes off? Whether another slip is being printed of the BJP and being cut and put in the box, you don't know. There is absolutely zero reason, no reason at all why the glass of the VVPAT machines was replaced from transparent to opaque, and that you have to have a light coming on inside for you to see what is happening. So that gives further room for manipulation. So this is one problem with the EVM and the VVPAT machines. But there is a larger problem that we are now seeing with the Election Commission, and that is with the manner in which electoral rolls are being prepared. Of course, there is another problem, which is, there are several layers of problems. One problem is the replacement of the EVM machines. You see, it may be that the EVM machines do count. They are not, let's assume that they are not manipulated. But if the EVM machine, so after the polling, the EVM machine is stored in a strong room. Now only the Election Commission has access to that strong room. Election Commission and their officials are supposed to have access to the strong room. Suppose the EVM machines are replaced after the polling and before the counting, then also there can be manipulation. So there is possibility of manipulation at several levels. But today the problem that we are facing is the manipulation of the voters list itself. There is now plenty of evidence to show that voters lists contain all kinds of problems. as Rahul Gandhi showed for this one constituency in Karnataka, that there are more than 1 lakh votes or voters who are registered who have one problem or the other. There are some where 100 voters are registered at the same address, a one-room address, and 100 voters, sometimes 1,000 voters are registered at that one address. There are voters who are registered in multiple places in the same constituency, multiple polling booths. There are voters who are registered in multiple constituencies. There are voters who are registered in multiple states. So there is certainly a very serious problem with our electoral rolls as they stand today. And it is being said that the BJP has acquired some 50 lakh or 1 crore floating voters. These are voters. When there is election in Bihar, they will go and register themselves as voters in Bihar. And if the election commission is with you, if the election commission has been told that do whatever the BJP people say, then the election commission will allow people from, let's say, Rajasthan to come and register in Bihar. They only have to furnish an application that they want to be registered, and they will get registered. So these people go and vote in Bihar, they go and vote in Haryana, they go and vote in Maharashtra. The same people, same 50 lakh or 1 crore people are going and voting there. And the problem is that because there is no transparency about the electoral rolls, so today, for example, this Bihar SIR is being done. Now in this Bihar SIR, special intensive revision, they said that every voter has to fill up an enumeration form, and along with that give one or more of 11 specified documents, which included passport, birth certificate, property certificate, matriculation certificate, caste certificate, etc. Now, when a survey was done in Bihar as to how many people have these documents, it was found that other than matriculation certificate, which about 40% people have, only 2%, 3% people have any of the other documents, with the result that less than 50% people have even a single document that the election commission had specified. Therefore, the majority of the people in Bihar cannot produce any one of these 11 documents. The documents that they can produce, which most people have, are Aadhaar card, ration card, and voter identity card issued by the election commission itself. But those documents were not specified, and the election commission was not accepting those. Then the time given for this revision in Bihar was so short, 25 days for people to fill up the enumeration forms and hand them over to the election commission, that actually the majority of the enumeration forms were filled up in the office of the election commission itself by the booth level officers of the election commission. They were signing in place of the voter and just giving them in. As a result of which, when people sent objections, we find that a very large number of objections are by people themselves to their own names. People are saying that I am dead. People are saying that I have shifted out. I mean, something very astounding has happened in this Bihar special intensive revision. And all this was happening because Election Commission was not giving out anything to the public. They produced a draft electoral roll in which 65 lakh voters were removed from the earlier list had 7.89 crore, 7 crore 89 lakh people in the roll which was prepared in January this year. And when they published the draft roll in August, 1st August, it had 7 crore 24 lakhs, so 65 lakhs were removed, names were removed. They were not even giving the list of the 65 lakhs whose names were removed until the Supreme Court directed them to do so. When those names were given, they said that, well, some 40 lakhs have shifted out, or some 40 lakhs have shifted out, some 20 lakhs are dead, and some others are registered in 2 places, therefore we have removed them. And then it was found that those who are they are saying are dead are not dead. Those who are saying that they have shifted out have not shifted out, many of those, etc. And when an analysis was done as to whether these 65 lakhs whose names have been deleted, whether they are Hindus or Muslims, just on this parameter, a private organization did this analysis. They found that 25% of the 65 lakh names deleted are Muslims, even though the population of Muslims in Bihar is less than 18%. So there was indeed an effort by the Election Commission to delete the names primarily of Muslims from the electoral roll. Now, of course, yesterday they have published the final electoral roll again. In the final electoral roll, they have not yet given the names. They have only given the figures. They say that in the final figure, about 47 lakh voters have been deleted. That means out of the 65 lakhs, some 18 lakhs have been added back. Whether they are the same voters who were deleted who have been added back, or whether these 18 lakhs are the floating voters who have been added and those 65 lakhs continued to be deleted, we don't know. Because there is no transparency. And this lack of transparency that the Election Commission is displaying again and again, and this is not merely in the electoral roll, this is in giving those Form 21. You see, there is at the end of the voting, in every polling booth, the electoral registration officer, the polling officer of that booth, has to certify how many people have voted here in this booth. And that certificate has to be given to every polling agent. Now, when we say that, look, if you are supposed to give it to every polling agent, why don't you give it publicly? Why don't you put it out on your website? Why can't people see it? Why can't voters see it? Because ultimately, the number of people who have voted, and it's not merely the number of people who have voted, he has to say how many people came here to vote. Out of them, how many voted? Some people who may have come and registered but didn't vote. Some people where voting machine malfunctioned, so everything has to be specified by that polling officer, but this form is not being made public. This is not being given out to the public. As a result of which, public cannot even verify whether the number of votes which were cast in this particular booth matches the number of votes that are counted in that EVM when the EVM is counted. So, there are rules which say that every application that is made for adding a name has to be put out on the website. Names are not being put out on the website. There are rules which say that every objection that comes to a voter that his name should not be there has to be put out on the website. That is also not being done. There are rules which say that you have to give a notice before removing somebody's name from the electoral roll. You have to give a notice and hear that person, etc. That is also not being done. The rule for adding your name as a voter says that there is a Form 6. In that form, you are supposed to give some proof of the fact that you reside in this constituency, in this polling booth or this constituency. You have to give some evidence of your age, that you are above 18, some document to show your age, some document to show your place of residence, and that can be an Aadhaar card which shows both the things, age and place of residence. And then you have to sign a self-declaration for citizenship. You only have to say that I declare that I am a citizen of India, and if my declaration is found and proved to be false, I am liable to be prosecuted. That's all. No document is required to prove your citizenship, only a self-declaration is required. Now today the Election Commission is saying, no, we are not going to go by self-declaration. We will ask you for proof. You have to prove that you are a citizen. How does a person prove? He doesn't have a passport, he doesn't have a birth certificate, he doesn't have any document, he is not even a matriculate. How does he prove? He can only give an affidavit saying that, look, I was born here, I have been residing here. My neighbor can attest that I was born here and I have been residing here. He can also give an affidavit, that's all. In a country like India, where most people don't have these documents, what documents will you give? In Kerala, at least most people have matriculation certificates, etc. But in large parts of this country, people don't have any certificate. So Election Commission is saying, we have the arbitrary power and the sole power of deciding citizenship. When Election Commission in an earlier guideline had told, when intensive revision was being done for Assam earlier, in 2006 or so, they told all the officers that, look, Election Commission cannot decide citizenship. Citizenship has to be decided either by the Foreigners Tribunal or by a court or by the Government of India, not by the Election Commission. Therefore, if you have some reason to doubt somebody's citizenship, you refer his case to the Foreigners Tribunal or to the Government of India. But now the Election Commission is saying, no, we have the absolute power to determine citizenship, and no guidelines, no rules apply to us. We can arbitrarily decide by looking at all the facts as to whether somebody is a citizen or not. And what is happening is that the BJP, see, if you apply the same yardstick of whether somebody has some document to show citizenship, vast majority of the people will fail, and the vast majority of their names will have to be removed from the electoral roll. This is what happened when they were doing this citizens register. What was it called? The NRC, National Register of Citizens in Assam. When they did that, fortunately, because it was under the supervision of the Supreme Court, it was at least done in a somewhat secular manner. It didn't distinguish between Hindus and Muslims. As a result of which, the vast majority of the people who were left out of the National Register of Citizens were Hindus. And only a small minority were Muslims, or minority only were Muslims of those people who were left out. So this did not suit the BJP, so they said, all right, we will bring a Citizenship Amendment Act, and using the Citizenship Amendment Act, we will declare the left out Hindus to be Indian citizens. We will grant them citizenship through the Citizenship Amendment Act, but we will not grant citizenship to the Muslims. And that's why the Citizenship Amendment Act said only non-Muslims coming from Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan will be granted citizenship. But there, if you applied for grant of citizenship, you had to say that you were from Bangladesh or Pakistan or Afghanistan and that you were a refugee there and you had suffered religious prosecution, and most of the Hindus were not willing to say that. So even that ploy failed. So now they have come to another situation because their whole project is to deprive Muslims and minorities from voting rights. This is the whole Hindutva project. So having failed to do that through NRC, having failed to do that through CAA, they are now trying to do it through this SIR, Special Intensive Revision. They are saying that all right, we will now vest the Election Commission with full arbitrary power to decide who is citizen, who is not citizen. And the BJP just sends them a list saying that all right, declare so-and-so to be citizens, so-and-so to be non-citizens, and that's how it will be done. But again, to some extent, because of the matter being in the Supreme Court and being under Supreme Court scrutiny, this project, at least for Bihar, also will not succeed, is not succeeding to the extent that they want. And some people are saying that, well, they will allow Bihar to go because the total manipulation that they may have achieved in this may amount to 4-5 lakh votes, 5-6 lakh votes. 5-6 lakh votes in Bihar is less than 1% of their total voters, and that's not going to be enough to swing the election one way or the other. So probably they have realized that because this matter is under the scrutiny of the Supreme Court right now, therefore let Bihar go. That means they are prepared to lose Bihar, but then they will apply this SIR ruthlessly in Bengal, in Assam, in other parts of the country, mainly to exclude. Now the thing is, there are many rules of the Election Commission itself which require them to be transparent about what is happening. So now there was another rule of the Election Commission which said that every citizen after the election is over can ask for all the records of the Election Commission. That included the video recordings, etc. Because very often the Election Commission is saying that voting till 5 p.m. was 60%. But after 5 p.m. it increased to 70%. Now, if the video records were made available, we would be able to see whether actually people voted, so many people voted after 5 p.m. or not. But they are not releasing those video records. They have made some amendment in the rule in order to refuse to release that video record. So basically what the Election Commission is doing is they are stopping every kind of transparency so that arbitrarily in the cloak of night they can do whatever manipulation they want, and they don't want people to come to know. As Rahul Gandhi said, that it took them 6 months to analyze the voters of that only one constituency because the Election Commission did not give the records in an electronic form, in a computer readable form, so that that analysis could be quickly done. It had to be manually done. Many people were required to do it over 6 months' time. Alarming state of affairs where the Election Commission is just functioning as an instrumentality of the BJP, trying their best to hide everything from the people, and wanting an arbitrary power to, now using this special intensive revision to arbitrarily remove whosoever they want, add whosoever they want. This seems to be their game plan. Whether this game plan succeeds or not will depend upon the awareness and the involvement of the ordinary citizens of the country in this process. If there is enough of a public movement against this to force the Election Commission to become transparent, transparency is the key. Following their own rules, their own manual, and transparency is the key to all this. Because if they are transparent, then this manipulation can be easily detected it can be largely stopped. But in the lack of transparency, if you don't even know who are the people in this final electoral roll, if you don't know who are the people who are deleted from the last roll, if you cannot do a machine computer search, because if there are more than 7.5 crore names, even in Bihar alone, then you need the resources of computers to analyze them. But Election Commission has everything, but they are refusing to. So this is the problem. Now, about the questions that were asked, one of the questions was what can be done to make the Election Commission more fair, etc. One of the things is that Supreme Court in a constitution bench judgment recently said that election commissioners cannot be appointed by the government alone. They have to be appointed by this committee, which includes the Chief Justice. But they brought a law to annul that. Chief Justice was moved out and another minister was brought. So today Modi, Amit Shah and Rahul Gandhi keeps objecting to the names and his objections are ignored. So therefore, again we are back to square one where the government is unilaterally appointing. We have challenged that law. That challenge is pending in the Supreme Court. We hope that that challenge will be quickly decided. So one thing that can be done is to, of course, have a better and more independent selection committee for appointing the election commissioners. Model code of conduct, as I said, is not being enforced, is being only selectively enforced. Election Commission, because it is functioning as an instrumentality of the ruling party, they are hardly enforcing the model code in a fair way. About inner party democracy and criminalization of politics. You see, some people have been suggesting that if charges are framed, serious criminal charges are framed against a candidate, that he should not be allowed to contest. I do not agree with that suggestion for the reason that the ruling party can today easily frame an innocent person, and if there is a critical opposition leader, they can frame him in a false charge and thereafter prevent him from contesting the elections, because framing is very easy. And when a court frames charges, it has to frame those charges without a trial, before a trial, on the basis of the evidence presented by the police. And if the police just says, ki, look, one witness is saying that I saw so-and-so committing this crime, that is good enough to frame charges. So therefore that will be a dangerous amendment or dangerous law to ensure decriminalization of politics. That has to be done by the people themselves. They have to decide wisely, and their organizations like ADR and other independent organizations, their work is very important to make it transparent as to what is the evidence against a particular candidate. You see, the fact that a candidate has some cases against him is not necessarily evidence of the fact that he has done anything wrong. That has to be seen on the basis of the kind of evidence that there is, and some citizens' organizations should and must do that job. Also, I feel that there needs to be citizens' organizations which monitor the performance of each MP while he is an MP, as to what has he done. How has he performed in Parliament? What else has he done? Good or bad, what has he done? Then inner party democracy. There is a lack of inner party democracy in various political parties, and that also needs to be addressed. Now, there can be election commission can monitor the functioning of inner party democracy, but only if the election commission is independent. If you give them the power if you give the power to a biased election commission to decide whether a party has inner party democracy or not. For example, the BJP has no inner party democracy. The present election commission will never say that. It's so evident that there is no inner party democracy. But they will say this quickly about the Congress party or various other political parties that no, there is no inner party democracy. So it's a tough call as to what should be done to determine to see inner party democracy. Perhaps that's not something that can be determined by law. That's something which has to be monitored by the people themselves. People should not vote for those political parties which do not have any inner power democracy, etc. Then there is of course a larger issue. You see, one of the ways in which the role of money power can be reduced in elections is also by proportional representation. See, in proportional representation, what happens, and that's the system in many other countries of the world, that every party gives a list and people vote. Instead of voting for a candidate, they vote for a party. If a party receives 10% vote, the first 10% in their list get elected. A slight improvement can be made to this, that every person casts 2 votes, one for the party and one for their favorite candidate within that party. In that case, if a party gets 10% vote, that party will get 10% seats, but not the top 10%. Those 10% who receive the maximum votes within that party. So that gives the elector a little more control over which candidates of that political party get elected. In proportional representation, you are more likely to vote for your favorite party than in first past the post. Because you know that though this party may get only 5% or even 2% of the vote, at least 2% or 5% of their people will get elected. So you are more likely to vote for your favorite party and your favorite candidate than you are in a first past the post system. In a first past the post system, you feel that this is my favorite candidate and my favorite party, but there is no chance of his winning. There is no chance of his party coming to power. Therefore, why should I waste my vote? That feeling of wasting your vote will not happen to this extent in proportional representation. The other thing that can also be done is state funding of elections. So today there are some candidates, good independent candidates, or from small political parties who cannot even spend this 1 crore, which is the limit of election expenditure, who cannot even spend 10 lakhs. And therefore, even if the limit on expenditure was rigidly enforced, there would be many big party candidates who will spend 1 crore, and there will be other candidates who cannot even spend 10 lakhs. Now, to remedy this problem, one solution which was found was state funding of elections. That the government pays every candidate, let's say 50 rupees per vote received. If you receive 1 lakh votes, you will get 50 lakh rupees. So that good candidates who have good recognition and good, they are respected in their constituency, but if they have no money, they can borrow from their friends and relatives and say, well, after the elections I will pay you back. And once they receive 1 lakh, 2 lakh votes, they get 50 lakhs or 1 crore and they can pay back. Now people say that no, how can the government afford this? Now it's easy to see how can the government afford this. 50 rupees per vote. There are total 60 lakh voters in the country or 70 lakh voters in the country. Or let's say 60 lakh votes are polled in one election, general election. So 60 lakh multiplied by 50 is 3,000 crores. So maximum expenditure for state funding is 3,000 crores in one general election. As I said, the BJP alone spent 50,000 crores in the last general election. The government of India spends tens of thousands of crores in one general election. Therefore, state funding is not financially unviable. It is very easily financially viable. So that is another reform which can be made of state funding. So those are my brief observations about the whole system of elections in the country today, and we are certainly at a very, very delicate stage of our democracy of having elections which are largely manipulated in multiple ways, and therefore we as civil society, as members of political parties, we have to be very, very vigilant about this. We have to raise our voices about this. We have to seek transparency. We have to seek proper guidelines and rules through which the Election Commission must function. And of course, we have to seek independence of the Election Commission also. So I'll end with this. Thank you very much.